Hello everyone, Festina here. In this video, we are going to learn all about global variables and context variables. First of all, let's start by understanding what variables are. While you're running your app, you might want to store some of your data temporarily somewhere, and that's where variables come in picture. So, variables pretty much provide you a storage space for temporarily storing your data while the app is running. And you can think of variables as containers which are named. And inside the container, we will place our data which we want to store. So, for example, let's say there is a variable called username, and I'm storing in my name Festina in that variable. Now, in my app, wherever I'm going to use this variable in any formula, that's going to replace my name in its place. Now that you understand variables, let's get started with understanding global variables. Global variables, as the name suggests, these variables are accessible across all the screens in your app. You can also change the value in the global variables from any screen in your app. In your global variables, it is absolutely possible to store your strings, numbers, tables, records, or Boolean values. Now let's go ahead and create a global variable. So for that, I'm going to add in a button. The button has been added, and in the on select property of the button, we're going to create a global variable. So for that, the function that we're going to use is called set. Let's give in set, and the first parameter of this function is going to be the name of your global variable. So you can give in any name, ABC, XYZ, test, VAR, username, but what really matters is that it is meaningful, and later on when you look at it, you need to understand why this variable was created. For our example, I'm just going to go VAR username. That's going to be my variable name. And in this, I'm going to store the name of the user who has been currently logged in. And for that, we can use the function called user. With the user function, you can retrieve the name of the user who is currently logged in to the app. So I'm going to give user.fullname. So with that, our set function is complete. And right now, I'm going to click on this button. Now our variable is set. Let's take a look at that. On the left pane, the fourth option is variables. Once you go to that, you see a list of all the different types of variables that you can have. And the first one is global variables. I'm going to expand that. And in here, you can see VAR username, and the text is my name, Festina Anthony Raj. Now, let us take a look at how we can access the global variables which we have created. For that, I'm going to add in a text label. Now, in the text property of this text label, we're going to give in directly the global variable's name. So we're going to give VAR username. And that's it. You can see that my name is displayed. So this way you can create global variables and display them in several different controls. The next important point about global variables is that this is accessible from any screen of your app. Now for that, let's go ahead and create another screen. Just gonna create screen 2. And in here, I'm gonna add another text label. The text label has been added, and I'm going to change this as welcome. And next I'm going to give in a ampersand, which means we are going to concatenate different strings. And now let us go ahead and give in the name of the global variable, which is our username. And there you go. You can see that you can access the global variable which we created from screen 1 in screen 2. And now we're going to see how we can change the variable's value from a different screen. So for that, let's go ahead and add a button. And in the buttons on select property, I'm just going to say set, which is again the same function which we used for initially setting the global variable. Let's give in the name of the global variable which we want to change. And here I'm going to give in the name Sherwin so that it changes. Let's go ahead and click the button, and you can see here that it has been changed. And global variables can be used not just for storing strings, we can also use global variables for storing numbers. Now let's go ahead and create a counter functionality by using global variables. For demonstrating the counter functionality, I have added two buttons here. The first button says set to 0 and the second button says increment. So while clicking on this button, I'm going to create a global variable called counter and set its value to be 0. And on the on select property of the increment button, what we are doing is we are adding 1 to the existing value of the counter, and we're storing the result of that to the variable counter again. Here we have the label which we added previously, and this label's text property is currently set to the global variable counter. Now let's go ahead and see how that works. So I'm playing this and let's click on the first button, set to 0. And now I'm going to click on the increment button. So every time I increment, you can see that the current counter is incremented by 1. In the next example, I'm going to show you how we can store a table in a global variable. Here I have a SharePoint list called branch office locations. This contains all the records about the different locations wherein an organization has branch offices. We have three columns here called country, state, and city, and all three of type single line of text. So for our example, we're just going to do a filter on this dataset, and we're going to filter out all the records which have the state as California. After that, we're going to add the set of filtered records in the form of a table to a global variable. I have already connected this particular SharePoint list to my app. Now on screen too, I have a button called set table. We're going to add the set function for adding the table. Let's go ahead and add set. First, we need to give in the name of the global variable. In this case, we will give California because we're going to filter out the records which have California as the state. Now we're going to do a filter on the data source. So the first parameter is the data set, which is the SharePoint list. And the second parameter is going to be our condition. So in our case, we're going to compare the state column with the word California. So that's done. And right now, let's go ahead and close this. And I'm going to click on Set Table button. And let's go to the variable section. Here you can see VAR California, and you can see that it is a table with 5 rows. Let's click on View Table. So every record from that list which has California state has been filtered out and added to this table over here. Now let's go ahead and display this table in a data table. So from insert, we need to choose data table. Now let us move the data table over here. And in the items property of the data table, we need to mention the name of the variable which contains the table. So I'm going to give in California. And right now we do not have any fields displayed here. So I'm going to click on edit fields from the right properties pane. And let's choose city, state, and title. Title column is the one which has been renamed as country in that list. And click on add. So we can see all the records filtered out from that and added over here. So this is an example of how you can add a table to a global variable. And when you have a data set which is not very huge or you do not have to do a lot of data manipulations, then go ahead and use a variable. But if you have like a large data set and you have a lot of manipulations which you need to do, then go ahead and use collections instead of variables. Now, there is another example which we can demo along with this. You can use global variables for setting Boolean values. For example, we can do a sort on this data table over here. So for that, I'm going to add in a sort icon. So let's go ahead and search for sort from the insert menu. And here we have it. I'm going to add the sort icon over here. In the app's on start property, I'm going to set a variable. So that variable is going to be called is ascending. And we're going to set this to be true. And right now, let's go ahead and click on run on start. Because when you are playing the app, all the functions in the on start property run while the app loads initially. And right now, since we are in edit mode, that does not happen. So we need to do a manual run on start so that this function gets executed. So right now, this variable would have been created and the value would have been set to true. And now let's go to the sort icon over here. And in the sort icon, so we're going to say set. And here let's give is ascending. So here we're going to give not of is ascending. So it is pretty much like whenever is ascending variable is true, we're going to set it to false. And whenever this variable is false, we're going to set it to true. So that is what pretty much happens when you click on this particular icon. Right now, let's go to the data table over here. Now we need to change the items property of this particular data table so that this table is sorted based on the is ascending variable which we created. So let's go to the items property. And we have a function called sort by columns. We're going to make use of that right now. So what sort by columns does is it pretty much sorts the data set based on the columns which you mentioned. The first parameter is the source which we need to sort. So I'm going to give in the name of our variable, which is VAR California. And the second parameter is column. We need to mention based on which column we need to do the sort. So I'm going to just give city. And the last parameter is the one where you choose whether it's going to be sorted by ascending order or descending order. And now that we have a variable which decides it, we're going to make use of that variable in this parameter. So here let's give in a if condition, and I'm going to say if is ascending, which means if is ascending is true, then I'm going to give sort order dot ascending. And if it is false, I'm going to give in sort order descending. That's it. We have closed it. So right now you can see that all the records have been sorted based on the city column. Now let's go ahead and play this. When I click on this icon, if is ascending is true, that's going to be set to false. And when that is set to false, this data table is going to show up items in descending order. So there you go. And this way you can also use global variables for switching between light themes and dark themes in your app. Now let's go ahead and see how we can set a record in a global variable. I'm going to give in set and give in employee information as the name of the global variable. And here we can mention a record to be added inside it. For that, add your curly braces and close it. And inside, we can add whatever fields we have. For example, I'm going to give in name as J. And let's give in the ID of the employee as some number. So that's done. And right now, when I click on set record, a record would have been created. Now let's go back again here, and you can see here employee information. And once I click on this, I can see view record, and you can see that the record has been added successfully. I have added a text label here, and we're going to see how to access the values in the record. So let's give in the name of the record, which is employee information, and you give in a dot. And here you will be able to see the different columns which you can access from that record. So if I'm going to give in name, I can see the name displayed over here. And if I'm going to give in ID, I can see the ID of the relevant employee. So that's all about how you access it from a record. And let's try another example. So instead of directly hard coding this in PowerApps, let's go ahead and add an item from a SharePoint list. So for example, let's create a variable called first record, and here I'm going to give in a function called first. So what this function does is any data set you provide, it's going to retrieve the first record from that data set. And here let's use the branch office locations SharePoint list which we already added, and let's close this. So that's it. I'm going to get rid of this label right now. Now let's click on set record. Let's go to this, and here you can see first record. And once I click on view record, you can see the first record of that SharePoint list, which is Los Angeles, California, United States, and every associated column which we have from that item. So here you can see that that is the first record in this list. So this way you can also assign records to your global variables. I believe you've seen a good amount of examples for global variables. Now let's get started with context variables. Context variables, as the name suggests, can be accessed only in the context of a particular screen. So if you are creating a context variable on this screen, say screen 2, you can access the variable only inside screen 2. If you're going to try to access it from another screen, you're going to face an error for sure. The real-time use cases of using context variables are for things like displaying pop-ups, dialog box, or anything relevant to a specific screen. In those cases, we can go ahead and use the context variable. It is possible to pass context variables from one screen to another screen through the navigate function. Now let's take a look at a couple of examples of context variables. So here I have a button called delete record. And once I click on this button, what is going to happen is a dialog box will be displayed asking me to confirm whether I want to delete the record. So for this, we're going to use the context variable. And let's go ahead and set the context variable in the onSelect property of the button. So for setting a context variable, we need to use the function UpdateContext. So let's go ahead and use that. And here I need to give the curly brace, and inside this, I need to mention the name of the context variable. In our case, I'm just going to give var dialog box, and I'm going to set this to be true, and that's it. So once I click on this, the context variable var dialog box will be set to true. And what I want to happen is I want to display a dialog box based on this variable. So here on the left pane, you can see group one. This is a dialog box which I have created using some buttons and labels. On the visible property of this group, we are going to set the variable var dialog box. Now let me go ahead and play it. Context variable got updated and the dialog box is visible to me. Here, once I click on yes, the record has to be deleted. The logic for deleting the record needs to be added in the onSelect property of this button. And if at all I decide to not delete the record, I'm going to click on cancel. And in this case, I want to hide the dialog box. So here in the cancel buttons on select property, I'm going to change the value of the context variable which we created. So for that, we're going to give update context again. And let us give NVA our dialog box. And this time I'm going to set this to be false. So this way, once I click on the cancel button, it's got to be hidden. So let's try this again. I'm going to click on delete record and it's visible. Clicking on cancel is going to hide it. You can use context variables whenever you're going to use this only within a single screen, and you have no necessity to update this value on any other screen. So I also told you that the context variables are not accessible from any other screen. As an example, let me create screen 3. And here let us add in a text label. So in this label's text property, I'm going to try to give in the variable which we created in the previous screen, which is var dialog box. And here you can see the red squiggly line and it shows us an error. It says the name isn't recognized because this variable was contextual to screen 2. Screen 3 has no idea about it. We can also pass the context variables from one screen to another screen through the navigate function. Let's see how that is done. Here we have a text input, and in this text input, we are going to get the customer name from the user. And once we get the customer name, and when the user clicks on the button, the customer name is going to be sent to another screen as a context variable. And let's see how that's done. This text input's name is text input underscore customer name. And in the on select property of this button, we need to set up the navigate function. We're going to use the navigate function, which is going to navigate us to another screen. And the first parameter is the target screen, which is our destination screen. And in our case, it's going to be screen 3. And the next parameter is going to be about the mode of transition to the other screen. We can choose any effect that we want. I'm just going to choose screen transition.fade. And the third parameter is not mandatory. This is an optional parameter. If you want to send some context variables, go ahead and add that in the third parameter. If not, you can just close your navigate function with this. So now that we're going to send something, we just need to give a comma and add the curly braces and close this navigate function. So inside the curly braces, I'm going to send a context variable to the next screen, and let's name that as var customer name. And let's give in a colon. So here I need to mention the value which is provided in this text input. So let us give in text input underscore customer name dot text. That's it. So right now when I click on the button, we will be taken to the next screen and we will be able to access the customer name variable from screen 3. Now let's quickly take a look at screen 3. Here I have a text label, and in the text label I have mentioned customer with an ampersand, which is going to concatenate two strings. And here I have given the name of the variable. Right now the variable has not been set, so you do not see anything, it's blank right now. Now let's go back to screen 2 and try this out. So I'm going to give in the customer name as Aaron, and let's click on next. Now when I click on next, you can see that we came to screen 3 and the value Aaron has been passed from screen 2 to screen 3. So whenever you have situations wherein you need to pass variables between screens, go ahead and use it this way. Maybe you have a list of products in screen one and you need to choose a particular product. So maybe you can send information about that product to the next screen, and in the next screen you can display all the information about the particular product. So you have a lot of use cases wherein you can go ahead and use context variables. So that is pretty much about it. I hope you got a good understanding of global and context variables. In the next video, we will learn about collections in great detail. If you enjoyed this video, like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel to be notified on upcoming videos.